So hi, everybody again. I would like to welcome to this webinar. It is the introduction to system validation and qualification. And today I have with me Yyves Loison. He's an expert from QBD. He's an expert of he's a pharmaceutical consultant. And my name is Angel Buendia. I'm the knowledge manager, QA expert from Scilife. And I would like to have Yyves introduce himself first. So hi, Yyves, good to see you here. Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, hello, good morning, everyone, or good day. My name is Yyves Loison. I'm located in Belgium, and I'm a senior life science consultant for QBD. And in the past, I performed several projects for equipment qualification, clean room qualification, process validation, sterilization validation, so the whole broad scope of qualification and validations. This was performed with a couple of different clients that we work with. Yeah, and no, at this moment, currently we're working at facilities and utilities qualification. So that's a little introduction from my side.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, Yyves. So the webinar is structured in 3 different sections, right? So we have just made a brief introduction to what we are going to do now. And secondly, there's the main section of the training that will be provided by Yyves. And his explanation is about system validation and system of equipment. And computer system validation, I want to let you know that it will be covered in another session in the future, right? So today you will acquire a basic understanding of the implementation of a risk-based approach with a structured guidance of ISP baseline guide volume 5, which is about commissioning and qualification. And you know that it is applicable to pharmaceutical manufacturing facilities and also to equipment and systems. So, right, I think the presentation is very interesting, and if we'll go through to an in-depth topic, but we will try to keep it, let's say, some shallow to adjust some time for the Q&A session at the end, right? So at the end, you will have time to ask anything you need to know from Yyves' presentation. You can go more in depth to any particular topic you may have. So feel free as we go through the training to use and to pose your questions in the Q&A section you will find in the Zoom bar below. And right, for the people that have just dropped in, the Zoom bar has a button below, a chat button, but it also has a Q&A button. If you click on the Q&A button, you can post your question here. We will see them, and we will make sure to answer as many as we can online. And just to let you know that if we do not have time for all the questions, don't worry, because all of them that are not answered during this session will be answered over email after the training, right? Okay, so with that said, I would like Yyves to start with his part of the presentation. So, right, Yyves, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, thank you. We have almost 45 minutes to cover 50 slides, so let's get started for this introduction on validation and qualification. First, I like to give some examples. It's a bit longer ago. I know it's a historic example, but it really points out the importance of qualification and validation that we do, and we have to keep that in mind, because qualification and validation, it requires a lot of effort, a lot of documentation, but it's for the greater good. So the first example for this was the Qatar incident, already happened in 1955 in the USA, where they produced some vaccines, which is a really hot topic at this time as well. But for the Salk polio vaccine, they had some process changes during production that they believed that would be more effective. But they just believed it, maybe rationalized it, and not have tested it. The consequence of that was that the vaccine still contained some living, if you can say that, of a virus, some active polio viruses, and like 56 paralyzed children were the outcome, and even 5 persons died. What can we learn about this? We'll see in a couple of slides hereafter that risk assessments is a major part of qualification and validation, so don't lose that topic out of sight. The second one, also a longer time ago, but in the UK, the Devonport incident. If I would ask any one of you to see visually the sterile and the contaminated bottle, to tell me the difference between the sterile and the contaminated bottle just by sight, I don't think anyone can do it, except you have to add some strips or color strips on it, then you can see it. But here in this case as well, after an autoclave sterilization cycle, some bad maintenance happened as well. Of the quality control was not set up that good. Only samples were taken from the top shelf, but on the bottom shelf, some non-sterile bottles were still present in the load. So this example as well led to a couple of, unfortunately, a couple of patients died to this extent as well. What do we learn here from is quality control, which is the outcome sometimes of qualification and validation, should be well rationalized, and as well the maintenance plan is also very important. It's not really a part of qualification, but it will be checked during the IQ phase of our validation approach that the maintenance plan is in place. If we have a closer look to why we do qualification and validation, we do it to be sure about a more positive qualitative outcome for our products, to reduce as well the amount of discrepancies, and so linked, maybe interesting as well, it will reduce the cost of production and manufacturing. At a later stage, we do it as well because it is asked and it is obligatory and from the authorities. We here in Belgium have like the EMA, the European Medicine Agency, which is our authority. Another well-known is the FDA from the United States of America. And they develop regulations, directives, and as well guidelines to process and guide us through the qualification and validations approach. For the difference between the regulations and a directive, if this one is not known, regulations are the law, like it's stated. Directives are binding as well, but the result is binding. And here in Europe, the member states are a little bit free to describe the way how the result is achieved within a time frame. So it's still binding, but the way how to do it is a bit more free. If you have guidelines, these are not laws, but they help us to support our process of qualification and validation on a structured way. Some important guidelines related to the qualification and validation processes are the guidelines from the ICH, so the International Conference of Harmonization. And especially for qualification and validation, we have the Q7. That's the Q8. It's a little typo in my slide, sorry for that. And the Q9 guidelines about the good manufacturing practices, pharmaceutical development, and quality risk management. When we have a closer look to the definitions given by the EMA, so the European Medicine Agency, and later on the definition by the ICH guidelines, a lot of similarities will be in that definitions. When you have a closer look to the definition of the qualification, the EMA states that the qualification states for equipment, facilities, utilities, and system should consider all stages from initial development of the user requirements through the end of use of the equipment, facility, and so on. So qualification, it is really a life cycle approach. You have to do it in the end. We have to requalify it every couple of times And even at the end, when you retire an equipment, facility, system, you have to include some steps like end calibration, the goods documentation and archive, put the documents into archive and so on. The definition for process validation is, according to the EMA, that the process validation is documented evidence that the process is operated within certain established parameters and can be performed effectively and reproducibly to produce a medicinal product. So here, once again, the process validation will be a life cycle approach, and it will be documented that all tests are passed and that all rationales are documented, because what is not written down, it didn't happen before. The definition of the ICH Q7, so one of the guidelines of the International Conference of Harmonization, says that for qualification, that qualification is an action of proving and documenting that equipment or ancillary systems are properly installed, work correctly, and actually lead to the expected results. So here, once again, we see that the documenting is a very important step, and we have to test all qualifications and validation steps towards predefined acceptance criteria. So it's according to the expected result. If we take a broader system or a larger system, like a filling line, for instance, we can qualify washers, we can qualify the tunnels, the drying heat tunnels, and we can qualify the filling lines. But the qualifications of every separate part will not conclude in a complete validation. So qualification is a part of validation, but it does not constitute the whole process validation. The last definition of today, the validation according to the ICH is that validation is a documented program that provides a high degree of assurance that a specific process, method, or system will consistently produce a result meeting predetermined acceptance criteria. Once more, documentation is very important. The acceptance criteria has to be predetermined based on knowledge and risk assessments. If you would ask me the definitions between qualification and validation, because there are two terms that are used and mixed up a lot, I regularly use qualification if it's just one for an equipment and not for a process, and validation more in case of a process like we have a manufacturing process, a cleaning process, and like method validation as well. Now to the main part of this introduction for qualification. We will focus on the V model of qualification. It's shaped like a V, so not a big deal. Another approach is the ASTM E2500 guideline. It will not be discussed here in this intro, but in general, the biggest difference between the V model and the ASTM guideline is that the V model is quite rigid model, and we have like several stages for the validation and verification, while during the ASTM guideline that is combined as a verification phase, and it is a bit more flexible. But here in the training, we will focus on the V model. The V model, like you can see, it has three phases actually. We have the left wing of the V, which is more the, I will use my pointer. The left wing of the V, which is more the design phase, the planning phase for an equipment and so and other systems. Then the second phase we have in the top or the bottom of the V, the point, where we will build or order to build the equipment and perform a commissioning. And then the last phase or the third phase for me is the execution of the actual qualification, which is divided in the installation qualification, operational qualification, and performance qualification. And together that will form a V. So we have the V model for that. Through this training, we go over all phases, starting in the top left corner, and at the end, we will have the validation report. So let's start with the validation master plan. A validation master plan or an equivalent document. It's a procedure which is required in your company, which will describe the whole qualification and validation strategy of the company. So it will include the whole policy. It will address as well all roles and responsibilities of the executors, the management, the reviewers, all involved persons. So it should be stated in a matrix and a table in this procedure who is involved and what the responsibilities are. The total master plan, so the procedure of the site where you're working at, will give as well a summary of all facilities, equipment, system processes on the site, which are needed to be qualified and validated, as well with the status on it. So if you have to address the status, that means that even the validation master plan has to be revised to present the actual status of the validation and qualification program. The master plan as well will include some guidance about the change control and deviation management, which will be followed during the validation. And maybe you have already change control and deviation management in place for the whole company, but it can be a little bit different for a larger project or qualification. But that should be stated in the master plan. And the main part and most important part is that it should state or define which strategy that will be applied in your company for completing all qualification and validation. Is it the V model? Is it more risk-based? And so on. It should include as well the requalification needed some bracketing strategies. For the validation master plan, so the previous slides were about procedure on site level. We can as well write a master plan for bigger projects. For instance, if you purchase just a fridge or a freezer, you don't need a master plan to describe that. But if you install a whole new site, you will need a separate document, the master plan, which will describe the whole validation strategy, the prerequisites for each phase, and so on. Afterwards, it can be started. You can start with the validation or qualification. If you go, maybe, so that was the validation plan. Now we are going to the URS, or the user requirement specifications. It's obligated as stated in the Annex 15 of the UTRLEX. So this is the EMA regulations. So it's the law. So we have to describe a URS, and a URS will describe all the specifications, like the title says, that the user wants. It's for equipment, it's for facilities, utilities, and so on. And each step you have to define as well, risk-based. Is this necessary for GMP reasons, or is it just a user wish that you want? And in total, you will describe a whole document which lists up these requirements. For instance, you can divide all topics into several chapters, like documentation. When we speak about documentation, I mean here procedure, work instruction, logbooks, maintenance programs, and so on. The environment, like in which temperature, relative humidity equipment works, should be tested. Functional, like functional specification, how should the engine work? From which materials it is built. A system description as well can be added. Safety reasons can be implemented as well, so we can make a differentiation between the GMP requirements and the safety requirements, which should be tested for our ASH departments. If you talk about maintenance, like the Devonport example that I give in the beginning of the presentation, maintenance can be added here as well. We need a spare part list to replace some broken components if needed, and the connections can be listed as well. Connections, I mean connections with electricity, maybe with some gases, with some water, with some other utilities. which are required. If we have a look to the left wing of the V model, we talked about the URS, and then we have actually the functional specifications and the design specifications. The URS is written by the company, by the owners. It means we want this, we need this, and it's written on a list. And the functional specifications and the design specifications can be an answer of several vendors on that request. So the functional specification will be a document from the supplier, vendor of the equipment, which states, okay, you want, you asked for this requirement for an automated system of something like that, or something like that, and we have this solution for it. Our engine will work as follows. So that is a functional specification designed by the vendor, and then the design specification is really a detailed document that describes every single part of the build of the equipment. If you write the URS, like said, we have to make the distinction between the GXP and the user required specifications. We can add as well some other, maybe business controlled requirements, some ASH requirements to the URS. You can be free in that. When something is addressed as a GXP, so it's really necessary for the legislations, but as well for the good functionality of your equipment, of your site, these requirements shall be tested into the qualification phase. So during the IQ, OQ, and PQ. The other requirements which are listed are not necessary to be tested during the IQ, OQ, and PQ phase, but will be tested during the commissioning phase. Overall, we're going a bit back in the V model. That's once again in the top left corner. The whole V model is based on the risk assessment. So it's a risk assessment, which means it's a living document. In the beginning of the project or your equipment, maybe you don't have all the knowledge with it, but you can perform a risk assessment, of course. After a couple of years, your knowledge is increased and you have to redo the risk assessment. Maybe based on that risk assessment, you have to add a couple of new specifications in your URS, or maybe remove some. It should also be, yeah, like everything, it should be clearly documented. We have a couple of ways to perform a risk assessment. Yeah, the FMEA is one for a complex system that can be done, where we address every failure, possible failure, with probability, severity, and detectability. Another way to split up your system is the system level impact assessment and the component level impact assessment. Based on a couple of questions, we will assess the whole system if it's GXP critical, and if it's GXP critical, if you have a GXP critical system, that system can be downgraded in several components, and those components, there's a list of questions for a component level and impact assessment as well. Those components can be assessed as well if they are in the system GXP critical, yes or no. The GXP critical systems will be included and involved in the whole qualification program. Please be aware, if there is a change in your equipment or even big change in the site, you have to revise your impact assessment or risk assessment. And it can have an impact on the URS, and it can have an impact on the qualification tests which were performed in the past and which will be performed in the future. As conclusion of the left part of the V model, so the planning and design part, be aware it's not yet built, the equipment or the system that we want to purchase. We can perform a design qualification. Actually, during the design qualification, we will check the design which is supplied by the vendor towards the URS that we've created and towards all the GMP or other legislations. Afterwards, after this design qualification, we can state from, okay, this is the required design and we can build the equipment. Is this always necessary to do? I think for the most complex systems, yes, but for a simple off-the-shelf system, it's not necessary to do. The second part of the V model is at the bottom of the V tab, where the equipment is built and where we will execute some commissioning phases. The commissioning can exist out of two phases. We have the factory acceptance test, the FAT, and the site acceptance test, the SAT, like it is called. The factory acceptance test is executed at the supplier, and it's a documented evidence that the equipment will function as it is ordered. You will test the GXP requirements, but you will test as well all the user requirements as is. Afterwards, if this is accepted, they will install or they will move the equipment to your site, your company, and a site acceptance test can be performed. Some tests can be leveraged between the factory acceptance test and the site acceptance test. If you know that transport will not have an impact on that, or maybe it's a documentation check, you can just leverage the result of that. So we have the factory acceptance test for critical and the non-critical requirements at the supply site, and the site acceptance test on the site of your company. Maybe important during the FAT and the SAT stage, the deviations that you occur or the failures that you see and evaluate do not necessarily lead to deviation or change control. That's for the next phase during the qualification stage. However, it will when you see it's such a big error that you have to rewrite or change your URS. If you change the URS, always make sure it's rationalized as well. For the commissioning phase, we have a little slide now. The Annex 15 of the EMEA states that, yeah, for complex technology, it can be required, so it's not a must-have. It can be required. And it should be done before the qualification phase and the installation. Yeah, like I said, a FAT can be executed at the supplier and can be followed by a SAT on the site itself. Maybe you can leverage some results from the FAT and the SAT into the next phase, like the IQ and OQ phase. But please be aware that if this is the case, it should be well documented, and you should be sure that it's not affected by the transport and installation of the site. So you can, if required, and if you want to leverage some FAT or SAT tests, it's a good practice to include it already in a validation plan, to make an evaluation of all tests which are performed and write it in front in your plan of your validation program, that you say, okay, we will perform this test in the FAT or this test in the SAT. And if these tests are passed, this test will not be impacted by installation and transport and can so be used during the IQ and OQ phase of the qualification. I would write it down in the IQ and OQ phase as well and put it in attachment so QA can see it during the review of the IQ and OQ reports, that everything is fine and according to the wishes. After commissioning, so at this moment, the equipment is built on the site, we will go into the qualification phase, the real qualification phase, to qualify the GXP critical requirements. And there it's separated into 3 steps. We have the installation qualification, operational qualification, and the performance qualification. If you have looked at the installation qualification, it's more all the things that you can check without you have to put the power on the equipment. That's like I see it added with the calibration of the sensors. You can do a visual inspection of it. You can do a documentation check. You can check the certificates if the correct materials are used, and so on. Do you have the right connections with the water? Do PNID walk down? You can calibrate the sensors and so on. Remember, all has to be documented evidence. So we have to write a protocol in advance, which states, okay, we will do this test in the future and we will test according to these acceptance criteria. And this is as expected when we want to pass this test. Afterwards, after installation qualification, we can go to the operational qualification. Operational qualification, in my mind, then we can already put the power on the equipment and we'll test each function or system, each item of the system, that it works correctly within the specifications. So for if you have a vessel with a mixer head in its side, does the mixer turn at the specified settings? Okay, you can check that. You can do it at the minimum setting, at the maximum settings, somewhere in between, and cover the whole range. We should check as well the alarm verification. So will it trigger an alarm if the parameter is outside its settings? And this can be done for the whole equipment. So during the operational qualification, we want to check actually that the system functions as it is designed within the whole range. It should be documented as well, so we have to write a protocol before OQ. It can be combined with the IQ if wanted, but you should write a protocol before executing of tests. The last step in the V-model qualification is the performance qualification. So actually, here we will check the reproducibility. We will check it a couple of times with ingredients between brackets with a load and the operation settings. So not the whole range of the equipment, but we'll use the operation settings for this one. Normally, the PQ should be started after successful IQ and OQ. It could be in parallel, but it should be rationalized. It's good that you have a release note for the IQ, OQ to start PQ, and where you rationalize, okay, we did the installation of an operational qualification with this and this deficiency or error, but this will have no impact on the further continuation of the performance qualification. So we can continue. So it can be done in, after the IOQ phase when they're still not completely passed. At the whole end, we have a validation report. We have written for every stage a protocol. We executed the test. We gathered the results. All tests have passed if we're lucky. If there's some failures, we have to write down in the report what the failures are, write down the discrepancies, the actions that we have taken. We do the tests to conclude that the validation is completed and successful. So the validation report has to summarize all tests, all acceptance criteria, all test results, and if any deviation occurred, a full investigation has to be applied. Additionally, it's a good practice, but not obligatory. Between the different stages like IQ, OQ, and PQ, it's good practice to write down intermediate reports to state, okay, we've performed the tests, and we can go to the next phase. Issues that do not hinder the start of the next phase can be taken into the next phase, like maybe it's a documentation check which failed. You can go on to the next phase without that documentation check, and you can check it properly in the next phase as well. At the end, a final report has to be written for all validations and qualifications which are performed, like if you have qualification, a whole program, and every system has its own qualification report. We will have to write a summary of all qualifications which are done in the project, and in that summary we'll have the conclusion that all results are okay and that qualification was completed. If in any case there are still some open issues left after the final report, it can be taken up in another deviation program, like your CAPA system at your company. but it's definitely not recommended. It should be well rationalized, but you can do that as well. So if we had a look to the V model, this was the last document which was stated, but we have as well a traceability matrix. The traceability matrix is not stated in the Annex 15 of the EMA, but it's a document, and I know here in Belgium the authorities are focusing on it, on the traceability matrix. It's a living document throughout your validation cycle. So from URS to impact assessment over the IOQ and PQ phases, which will link all required specifications with the description of it, link it with the test which will check the specification. So you will be sure one-on-one that every specification will be checked. You can mention that, okay, this is checked during the IQ, we check the specification, and at the end, during the validation report, we have a nice matrix which combines every specification with the tests which are performed, and that's a traceability matrix. It's a living document, so it says the best to write it in front of the test. So initially, you will have to say that this specification will be tested in the IOPQ phase. After the IQ phase, you can update the document and say, okay, we performed this, this, and this. After the OQ phase, once again, and after the PQ phase once more. Then a little bit about the requalification, only a couple of slides. Actually, every equipment, facility, utility that you have in the company should be requalified. It's not sufficient that you do an initial qualification of it, because some changes will happen. Maybe it's just getting old. And you have to be sure that it still remains in the state of control. So we have to perform a requalification for that. And the requalification program, it's not necessary to test everything from the whole qualification. So probably it will be only the most critical parts that you will check during the requalification. And you can perform a requalification for an individual equipment, or as well a requalification for a whole group of the same equipment. What do I mean with that? If you have, for instance, like 10 autoclaves or 30 welder sealers, you can make a bracket and say this year we will perform with load X on sealers 1 to 10 a requalification, and the next year we will change that, and all sealers will be included in the whole program, but not yearly, but maybe over a couple of years. It can be done, but you have to be sure that your equipment are comparable, of course. At what periods do we have to perform the requalification? Normally, like in the past, a lot of people only did the requalification once a year, but actually, like a lot of things, it's risk-based. We have to be aware about the consequences of the equipment or the process that we use. Like for sterility or sterile processes, you can do a media fill every half a year to decrease the risk of the outcome. So you can, based on the severity, on the potential of failure, you can assess it, and you can state for this type of equipment, we'll do the requalification once a year, more times a year, or even only once every 2-3 years. Does the whole entire qualification need to be repeated? Like I said, it's not the case. Please be sure as well, if a big change appears on the equipment or the system, it will have to go through change control, and it has to be assessed, and maybe a new qualification of the entire system must be performed, and not only a requalification. That was it about the V model and the qualification. We have a couple of minutes left, and I will go through the process validation. So we stated, as we saw in the definitions of the ICH, we can qualify every system separately, but the qualification will not lead to validation of the whole process or whole system on its own. It can be seen here in the little timeline. First, we have design, development, qualification, and afterwards, after all qualifications, we can perform the process validation. So the qualification is linked to the equipment. For me, process validations is linked to the process, the system, and will be tested on the product. Some definitions about the process validation. So it's once again very documented evidence that the process will be effectively and reproducibly reproduce its medical product towards the predefined acceptance criteria and quality attributes. It's as well a living life cycle. So in the beginning, you will have to gain a lot of knowledge to create your design. You have to write it down. It's very well documented. You have to use a lot of risk assessments to determine which parameters, what materials are critical to my end phase. And in this case, you have to mix them and prepare the process design of your process, and afterwards validate the process. So yeah, it's a life cycle approach. You can use the QBD approach, so that a lot of data should be collected for that. So the process, the manufacturer process, is no longer a black box, but we know very detailed what is happening during the process, and we know for every parameter which impact will it have on the outcome of the process as well. If we have a little look to the approach which can be followed during the qualification, I referred more to the EMA Annex 15 for the process validation. I can refer to the FDA guideline about process, FDA guidance of process validation, which was written in 2011. And there they defined 3 stages. First, the process design, then the real process qualification. And afterwards, after the process is validated, we will need a continued process verification step as well. During the process design, during the process design, we want to really understand a process which is happening, and want to create and set all limits of all parameters and all CQAs which has to be tested during qualification, but as well during release, and maybe continued process verification in the stage 3 of the process validation step. After the system or the process is fixed, we can perform the stage 2, the process qualification step. In the stage 2, we have two steps. First of all, we will check the prerequisites. So is whole the facility, all the equipment qualified, or all trainings performed, is all process or all procedures in place? Do we have a method validation? Is a computer system validation fine, and so on? So we have to check all prerequisites. And afterwards, we will perform the PPQ tests. So the process performance qualification, where we will do repeatedly a number of batches to prove that the normal operating ranges are consistently producing the product that we want. At the end, in stage 3, there's a continued process verification. So here, between stage 2 and stage 3, the process is fixed and validated, and it's approved by the authorities in this case. And it's on the market, so you've read it routine. Then, even then, we have to add some more controls and evaluate all the results during the continued process verification stage. We have to write a process control strategy for that. So every batch during routine can be checked once more. That's done because during qualification, of course, you will know already a lot, and you will take into account a lot of variables, but you can't include everything. So during the process, during stage 3, we'll take additional samples to prove that it's still within specifications from batch to batch analysis. If we see it in an illustration, the stage 1, it's the link between all the critical material attributes and all critical process parameters, which are designed and established. and they will have an impact on the CQAs, which are the quality attributes of the product. So we'll create that design and evaluate it. So we can create a nice design space for the manufacturing process and define already the control strategy, which can be used during qualification and in the routine. In stage 2, like I said, we have 2 parts. First, check the prerequisites and do the qualification of equipment, systems, and utilities. In the second part, we can perform the qualification of the whole process and prove that our process is within the control. Of course, like we said, and saw in the definitions, it's a documented evidence that we have to create. So like in the qualification, where we had to write every time a protocol, even here during process validation, we need a protocol, we need a plan how to do it, and what are the links between each steps. The protocol will include all the parameters that are listed, will say and state which sampling are needed, and will define the acceptance criteria. So if you do it, at the end, we want to state that the validation batches meet their acceptance criteria, but we have to evaluate as well the batch homogeneity, so between intra-batch, but as well the reproducibility. So we have to perform a statistical evaluation between batch 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 during the validation of our system, of our process. And the last step, and the last slide of this introduction is the stage 3 once more. So after stage 2, your process is fixed, is validated, and it's used in routine. So we have to take initial samples and controls to prove that even during routine and all the years that the process is in place, it still remains within the the specifications, the acceptability specifications. And by this slide, I want to thank you for your attention, and we'll go to the Q&A session.
Okay, good. Right, so thank you very much, Yyves, for this very interesting training. So this concludes the training, but we have now some spare time for the Q&A session. So we are really on time. We have about 12 minutes for the Q&A session. And I just would like to remind all of you that maybe the people who has joined lately, that you have a Zoom bar below the screen. You can click on the Q&A button, and here you can pose your question, right? We are going to try to answer as many as possible. I see some of them already here. And just to remind you that the questions that are unanswered, we will make sure to make a follow-up and send you an email afterwards, right? So let's begin by the first one. I have here one from Prasanna. Prasanna says, I wanted to know how the validation process is different for an IT application and a software as a medical device. Well, I don't know if you can answer it shortly.
Yeah, for an IT application, don't have experience with that. And now for IT applications, we have the following training, I guess. It will be included in this one, where you have a lot of the GAM categories, which will determine the criticality of your IT system. But I can't give a real explanation on that as I'm no expert in it. So
yes, the guidelines are different, right? So just to know that the second edition of GAM 5 has been recently published in July. So just have a look at there, and you'll have all the information in this guideline. Okay, we have another one from Camila. She says, could you please repeat the name of the second possible validation scheme?
Oh, yeah. So I have written it down, so I will go back to my slide for that. We have the V model, which is addressed in the Annex 15 of the EMA, but we have as well the ASTM E2500 guideline. So maybe you should, maybe I should set it or copy it in the chat or something like that.
Yeah, maybe we can include it in the info we are going to send afterwards. Right. That's another one from Camila. Would it be possible to obtain a line list of differences between those two strategies? Well, maybe not now.
Yeah. I said that the main difference was the verification phase. Like in the V model, we have the rigid model, like in IQ, OQ, and then the PQ, and first the FAT, the SAT. But in the ASTM model, it's just one phase, and it's called verification on its own. So it's more flexible to do what in which step, and it's linked with the risks of each component of your verification of your system.
Okay, good, thanks. So Philip is asking, what is the difference between PQ and PV?
The PQ, so the performance qualification, for me is still part of the equipment qualification. So it's, you will focus on your equipment, that your equipment is working, and PV stands for process validation. And so PV is the validation of your whole process, of your whole system, and is focused on the product or your cleaning or your sterilization. So like for instance, for sterilization during PQ, you will test your equipment, your autoclave or something likewise. And during PQ, we will test all temperatures, or if the temperature is distributed homogeneously. And we will check the sterility with indicators in a full load, minimum load. But during PV, you will check as well your product. Is it still stable? You can put it on stability studies, and is your product sterile, and not just the indicators. So PV is more linked with the product, and PQ to the equipment.
Okay, great. Right. There's another one from Kaumadi. Is asking, for equipment such as temperature and humidity control chambers for stability sample storage, if it is being continually monitored, would this still require requalification, or would it be sufficient to document a review of the continuous monitoring data at periodic intervals, for example, annually?
If it's continually monitored, I still do recommend an evaluation at least, because maybe your equipment has undergo some maintenance. It has maybe spare parts, another part in it installed, and so on. So it's good that it's controlled continuously, but the changes on that equipment maybe have an influence on the whole temperature distribution, and so it could be rationalized and evaluated that every year, every 2 years, a mapping can be in place. But I should rationalize it.
Okay. Right. Next one from Judith. What are the cleaning validation techniques?
Yeah, cleaning validation is not really covered in the slide deck indeed. During cleaning validation, it's a whole other strategy, because it's focused on the cleaning system as is. So you want to prove that your product is gone. So you have to determine all specifications about the toxicity of your product. You have to predetermine the acceptance criteria. You have to set up a method, so it's more a process validation, actually cleaning, and not done by the V model. Yeah, I think it's a large answer for to say here, but maybe we can say it, send it by mail, because we did it in the past. In the past, we have a couple of colleagues, a lot of colleagues who know it very well, so we can answer that question by mail.
Sure, perfect. Okay, next one from Katrina. Katrina says, are there documents templates available for all of these requirements and steps? She says, it seems like a lot of work to start from a blank paper. Yeah, I don't know if
Yes.
there are official templates to use.
I don't know if they're official. I know a lot of companies will have their templates. I think that you can reach out for Scilife and even QED for such things. We have it at our own company and can help with that, of course, but I don't know if there's some general accepted templates on the internet. So most of the time the templates are specific for each company, but there are companies like Scilife and QBD who can assist with this.
Okay, right. Okay, we are on 10. I think we have time for 2 additional questions, probably. So next one from Saptesh. Is bracketing a good approach to complete PPQ requalification studies inside that has multiple products?
Has multiple products. Well, I think it's hard to do that. And it's also very complex, but I know for the same product with different dosages, it can be performed and very well rationalized, which should be bracketed as well. If you can prove and scientifically rationalize that your products are equal to each other, then maybe you can bracket them. But I would not recommend, actually.
Okay, good, thanks. Right, another one from Bamchi. Bamchi asks, what criteria to be followed to determine the requalification period for new equipments? I think you already said so.
It's not stated. It's not clearly stated which criteria should be followed, but it's risk assessed. So you have to look at your own situation, your own company. Maybe you have already data for 30, 40 years, and you can use that data to rationalize your requalification program. If it's new and you only have a half year data, then your requalification period will be more stringent. So.
Okay, maybe we have time for an additional one. Okay, another one from Rowena. In simple terms, how can we differentiate OQ versus PQ? And the second one is, are there cases where we can combine OQ and PQ, and will that be acceptable?
The OQ is covering the whole range of the equipment. So from 0 till, I don't know what, maybe 200 degrees if it's temperature controlled or equipment. And the PQ is more with a loaded simulation, and you will only test and perform a reproducibility study on the parameters which are used in routine as well. So the OQ is a bit broader and only done once, and the PQ will be in a narrower setting, and it will be performed a couple of times after each other. Can these be combined? Yes. The IQ, OQ, and PQ can be combined as it is stated, but you have to state it in your master plan that you will combine it. At the end, it's important that every specification is qualified and tested, but you can combine the installation, operational, and performance qualification. Please be aware that if you perform some tests from the performance qualification, maybe it's really needed to have a calibration, to have some confirmation that your equipment is already working, but these can be combined, but you have to rationalize it.
Okay, all right then. Excellent. So we have to wrap up because it is just 1 hour training. So just to let you know that I have a few more questions in the list that we will make sure to reach out to you over email, right? So I wish that to thank all of you for attending to this webinar, and also for asking very interesting questions. I want to give special thanks to Yyves from QBD for this very interesting training. This is a hot topic about system validation and qualification, right? So yeah, thank you very much. And I hope to see you in the following training sessions, right? And goodbye.